All right, let's get right into it. What if I told you that you already have the key to completely transforming your health, your independence, and just your quality of life? But chances are, you're barely even using it. In this explainer, we're going to rediscover the single most important and most overlooked engine for vitality we have, our muscle. It's truly the closest thing we have to a real fountain of youth.
Just let that sink in for a second. It's the central paradox of our modern lives, isn't it? We have these absolutely incredible bodies, these marvels of evolution, but we've gone and built a world that practically begs us to leave that engine switched off. And this massive disconnect between our potential and our daily reality, well, that's where our story begins.
And this leads us to a pretty profound irony. You know, the ancient Greeks, they built these amazing athletic bodies using really sophisticated training methods, but they had almost no idea how muscle actually worked. You could call it a kind of ignorant mastery. We've completely flipped that script. We understand muscle right down to the cellular level, yet we've designed lifestyles that systematically make us weaker. It's like we have all the knowledge, but have we somehow lost the wisdom?
And that brings us perfectly to our first big idea, this concept of our forgotten power. And believe it or not, there's one specific muscle that is the perfect symbol for this whole modern disconnect.
You heard that right. Gluteal amnesia. It's a real clinical term. Our own nervous systems are literally forgetting how to fire up the single largest muscle in our entire body. This incredible evolutionary engine, the one designed to make us powerful runners and hunters, has basically been put to sleep by our chairs. So, how on earth did we get here? How did we let ourselves forget something so fundamental to our own strength?
Well, the answer, and this is wild, is rooted in philosophy. This bias we have against muscle isn't some new thing. It's a 2,000-year-old idea that has had devastating consequences for our health, and it helps explain exactly how we allowed ourselves to forget our own power.
It all started way back in the 4th century BCE. The philosopher Plato introduced this pretty radical new concept, that the mind and the body were separate, opposing forces, basically locked in an eternal conflict. Now, this wasn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It created this false choice between being smart and being strong. And then, this divide got cemented into Western culture by Galen, who is Rome's most influential doctor. He launched what was basically a full-scale attack on athletics.
I mean, just listen to that. One of the most important medical figures in all of history declared that physical strength literally made you stupid. And this wasn't some fringe opinion, okay? This was coming from the authority. Galen's writing survived for centuries, while the actual wisdom of trainers and athletes was lost, and that embedded this mind-body split deep into our thinking.
For centuries, this bias just kept going, and it was aimed especially hard at women. But in the 20th century, some true pioneers began to deadlift that glass ceiling, and I mean that literally. Let's talk about Jan Todd, a woman who absolutely shattered the myths about female strength. So, Jan Todd's entire life changed in a hotel gym. She saw another woman deadlift a weight that she just never thought was possible for a woman to lift, and for her, it was a total epiphany. She started training, and just 18 months later, she wasn't just lifting, she was breaking world records. Get this, nearly 400 pounds. That's what she hoisted off the floor. And her journey, it wasn't just about her own achievement. It was a direct challenge to a medical establishment that for so long had dismissed weight training for women as, dangerous and unfeminine.
And you know what? The science started to prove her right. Study after study found that when you adjust for lean body weight, women not only gain strength at similar rates to men, but in some cases, like with leg strength, the relative gains are even greater. The barrier was never biology, it was culture.
Okay, so this brings us to another huge myth that we absolutely need to debunk. This idea that losing your muscle is just an inevitable, untreatable part of getting older. The science says, no way.
The clinical term for this process is sarcopenia. And just look at that number. It affects almost half of all adults over 60. That's millions and millions of people who are slowly losing their strength and their independence, all based on a false premise. For decades, we've all just kind of accepted this as our fate. But then you hear stories like Dorothy's. At 92, she was so frail she was just shuffling, barely able to walk. But just 8 weeks later, 8 weeks after starting a strength training program, her daughter was stunned to see her striding confidently down the hall. She had tripled her leg strength.
And Dorothy wasn't some special case. In a landmark study of nursing home residents, this was the average strength gain, 174%. some improved by an astonishing 374%. We're talking about people who couldn't get out of a chair on their own, suddenly regaining that basic freedom. Some of them literally threw away their canes.
So the takeaway here could not be more clear. Our muscles never lose their ability to get stronger. Biopsies have actually shown that weight training can trigger a complete cellular renewal in elderly muscles. The potential for strength is in us at every single age. We just have to activate it.
And all of this leads to a pretty radical reframing of what exercise really is. It's not just this general activity you do for health. When it's done right, it's one of the most powerful and precise forms of medicine that we have. We really can, and we probably should, think about exercise like a drug. It can be prescribed with incredible specificity, the right type of movement, at the right intensity, with the right frequency and duration, all to achieve a specific outcome, exactly like a pharmaceutical prescription.
And when you do that, the results are just stunning. For depression, high-intensity resistance training can be just as effective as antidepressants. For type 2 diabetes in older adults, it's often more effective than medication because muscle is the organ that directly controls your blood sugar. And for arthritis pain, targeted quad strengthening just blows other common activities out of the water. The evidence is just overwhelming.
So as we start to wrap this up, let's just go over the key takeaways. First, muscle isn't about vanity, it is a fundamental pillar of lifelong health. Second, our cultural bias against strength, it's just a historical mistake, not a biological fact. Third, strength potential is not defined by gender. And critically, our ability to build muscle never ever leaves us. And finally, we have to start seeing strength training for what it really is, a precise and incredibly powerful form of medicine.
Which brings us right back to that engine we talked about at the beginning. It isn't broken, it's not gone, it's just been sitting idle. The capacity for remarkable strength and vitality exists inside you, right now, just waiting for you to turn the key. So the only question left is, what are you going to do with it?